well. Hello, I'm Stephen Berry, and thank you for joining us today, where we're looking at Microsoft Windows NT. And joining us once again, we have a familiar face. Hello, Stephen.
Hi, Stephen.
Well, we've seen you here before with Access. Something of a departure today, isn't it, for you?
Just a little bit. We're moving away from databases and into the operating systems, Windows NT, Windows NT Server.
So for those people that are watching that maybe haven't seen you before, you might like to tell us what you do at Microsoft.
I'm a systems engineer, which means I work in a pre-sales environment, advising customers or potential customers of the benefits of Microsoft products, applications and servers and so on.
Well, that's the sort of things I'd like to get at in this film. We're looking at the benefits of Windows NT, and it's version 3.51 we're looking at.
Yeah.
Who typically is using Windows NT?
Many different people, from very large corporates using it as the infrastructure for their network operating systems and application servers, through to technical workstation users, people wanting to use CAD/CAM type operations, or anybody, in fact, that has a PC powerful enough to run NT, which requires a little bit more memory than the standard Windows product.
Yes, there's probably a lot of people watching that maybe today using Windows Workgroups 3.11. Thinking about upgrading to Windows NT, and what would you say to them? What sort of things should they look for if that's what they want to do?
Well, I guess there's certain questions you should ask yourself. Why are you thinking of moving up to Windows NT? And I'm sure we'll go through some of the benefits and some of the differences to Windows NT during the first early parts of the video.
Right, so stay watching, basically.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we should make a start, and just a few little pointers on how to watch this. You'll find it's a lot easier just to fast forward to the section you want to learn about, or you can watch Stephen for 3 hours continuously if you prefer. But perhaps it's easier to fast forward, maybe. Okay, well, let's make a start. And you've got a number of different icons here.
Yeah, well, this is just one window. You can see that we have Program Manager. And this is really the main program group with all of the main applications already installed from Windows NT.
Fine. Okay, well, we'll look at those in more depth. I think now, though, we should move on and start having a look at the first topic.
Okay.
Well, we're going to start out with a tour around Windows NT, and I think just before we do, it might be worth explaining the difference, because we've got a workstation version and we've got the server version. So how does it all tie together?
Well, there are two versions of Windows NT, as you suggested, one of which is aimed very much as a file server, an application server for the corporate environments. And Windows NT Workstation is aimed more at desktop environments, people who want the CAD/CAM environment, or just have a single PC perhaps, if they want to gain some of the additional things that Windows NT offers them above Windows. Can you use the Workstation version as a standalone machine? You can indeed, and you can also use that as a file server, in fact.
Right. So, but in a network environment, you need one server at least.
Typically, for most networks, you need at least one Windows NT server.
How many machines could you have linked into that?
Really, that depends on the network, the number of users, what they're doing with the network, and so on. But one thing to bear in mind is Windows NT is very, very scalable. So you can start off just supporting 1 or 2 users, and then build up your network as the number of users grows. You could add more memory to that server. You could add more network cards, more disks, and just keep building that box so that it grows. It's a very scalable operating system.
Yeah, and I guess the majority of users are sitting in front of the Workstation version. That's what they're using in their company. Is that what we're looking at now in the tour?
Well, in fact, this is Windows NT Server, but it's very, very similar to Windows NT Workstation. We'll probably draw out some of the differences as we go through the tour.
Well, the Program Manager, for example, looks very similar.
The Program Manager in Windows NT Server, Windows NT Workstation, and Windows for Workgroups is the same, with the icons and so on.
What about, we see along the bottom now, these slightly different icons, the little faces and printers?
Okay, these are different program groups. And in here you can see that we have what we call common groups and what we also call personal groups.
Right.
The common groups means that it's common to that machine, so different users logging onto that machine will see that group, and we can see that represented by a little icon on the group of a machine. And the personal groups, which are configured differently perhaps for each individual logging on. So different people might have a different startup group that loads their favourite applications when they go into Windows NT.
Right.
And that's represented by a little head that represents an individual or a user.
Okay. We can see some commonality there with Windows 3.11, the applications, accessories, and startup. But the administration is slightly different there, isn't it?
Yeah, we've got some additional tools inside the administration group, which if we open that group, then we can see some of the administrative tools for managing the network and for managing the Windows NT server and workstation. And we'll step through some of these tools later on and look at the additional functionality there. But we've just minimized that for now. And the applications, as you suggested, most of those are added or when you install Windows NT, it looks through your hard disk and it would add the applications that you decide to install so that it can run those. Here you can see that I only have a couple of applications on here for Microsoft Quick Basic and also the MS-DOS text editor.
Okay. What about the accessories? Are they the same as we've seen?
Mostly they're the same. We have an additional one that we call Telnet, which again we'll look at later on during the
session.
Thank you.
Yes. Where are all the other icons? We normally see lots of accessories.
Yep, and things like Notepad and Microsoft Write and so on and so forth. I've chosen on my installation to remove those or not to install those, and so I didn't get them when Windows NT built the accessories group.
Right.
But typically you'd have Paintbrush in there and some of the other things as well.
Okay.
So I'll just minimise that one.
Good.
And if you'd just like to see how we'd actually create a new program group, it's the same as in Windows. In fact, most of the menus that we have in Program Manager are identical to those that we have in Windows 3.1 and 3.11.
Right.
You can see that we have a couple of additional menus here, things like log off and shut down, which allows me to shut down the computer, and log off allows me to log off as this user, and then maybe another user can come and log on.
Yeah.
Especially useful in the situation that we call serial users.
I was going to say, so could potentially different people be sitting at the same workstation and logging on as different users?
Yeah, and not physically at the same time, of course.
No.
So, for instance, when I finish with my session, I've maybe set up some groups that are personal to me.
Yeah.
Maybe I go home and you come on and take on the evening shift.
Right.
Then you can start using the computer, log in as yourself, and it would give you your desktop, and it would give you your personal program groups and your personal preferences and so on.
So it stores multiple configurations?
Yes.
And are they sent back to the server, or are they stored locally?
Well, typically they're stored locally, especially if you're in a standalone environment.
Good. Okay.
So if we wanted to create a new program group, it's File New, same as in Windows. And this time we get an option to create a personal program group or a common program group.
Right.
So if I wanted to create a personal program group, I just choose OK.
Is this something the user should be doing, or is the administrator perhaps setting that up for the user?
Well, typically personal program groups would be done by the user, but as an administrator of the machine or of the network, you can actually restrict users' rights to do all of these things, because Windows NT is a very secure operating system, and again, we'll probably come on to the security aspects later on.
Yep.
Okay, so let's create a new personal program group, and let's call that one Stephen's Favourites, if I could type. Stephen's Favourites, and that description, it doesn't have to be an 8.3 file name, it's just a description. Choose OK.
That's one of the features of NT, isn't it? We get away from the DOS character limitations.
We can do with one of the Windows NT file systems. Again, we'll look at that later on. Notice also I can size this, and notice while I'm sizing this that
it's actually sort of like animation, isn't it?
It dynamically updates the screen, so it doesn't leave that ghosted image behind that we used to get with Windows. And that's an option you can switch on or off, because of course that would require more memory and so on.
And this is so we have improved graphics handling?
Much better improved graphics handling, especially for things like AutoCAD type applications, where we support some sophisticated graphics capabilities. So I've created my new program group called Stephen's Favourites. It's a personal program group. Now, if I wanted to, I could create a new program item to place inside that group.
Yes.
And choose OK. And then I could, as with Windows, I could just go and type in a command line prompt, or I can browse.
Yep.
This gives me the file open dialog box. It allows me to go and browse and create an icon for one of the default file types. So let me go back. Notice also it took me to a directory called users default.
Yes.
That is the default that Windows sets up. So if I wanted to perhaps go into my SCSI directory, my CD-ROM directory, and maybe create perhaps there's a program in here, a little utility in here, maybe the SCSI test program, then I could create that program item. I'll give it a name called CD tester, and again I can have spaces in the description. It's very it allows that.
And a working directory?
A working directory I could save as the SCSI directory to make it look in there for default file open and so on.
So this is very consistent with Windows 3.x?
Absolutely the same in terms of this screen. The big difference is that having created that, I now have a little icon inside of my program group, And there you can see that's represented by what looks like MS-DOS. Okay. And that's because that is actually an MS-DOS program.
Yep.
And Windows NT detected that, so it gives me an icon for MS-DOS.
So no problems running DOS programs?
We'll probably come on to that later on, but typically most MS-DOS programs will run inside of Windows NT.
Yep.
So if I now minimize that, you can see that group's now on the lower right-hand side of the screen.
Right.
And the little user's head, what does that suggest?
That's a personal group?
It's a personal group, and of course I named that Stephen's Favourites.
Right.
Okay, if we go back up to the file menu, in fact, we can see that all of these are the same as in Windows 3.1 and Windows for Workgroups. Log off we'll probably come on to later on. In the options, I have an additional menu right at the bottom which allows me to save settings now.
Yep.
Remember in Windows, whenever you create changes to the desktop and you size things like program groups and so on, it usually waits until you exit Windows to save those settings. In Windows NT, we can choose to save settings now, and that will write that back to the disk.
Okay.
Now, the next time I log on to Windows NT as Stephen D, it would give me that new program.
So it's part of your configuration, not anyone else's?
That's right, yeah. The window menu is the same as previously, so I can just switch to the different program groups I have available, including Stephen's Favourites.
Yep.
And the help, the only difference here really is that when we go into Help About Program Manager, of course it tells me that now we're running Windows NT. It tells me the version number is version 3.51. Build 1057 indicates to me the build of the version that I installed from the Microsoft network or from my CD or whatever.
Is that important for the administrator to keep an eye on sort of revisions to that?
It can be, because of course this build 1057 means that this is the retail build of Windows NT, and if Microsoft do decide to produce an interim release or an update, then perhaps the number might change, or perhaps during beta testing we typically change the build number.
Right.
And you can see it's licensed to Mr. Soft. That's
yes,
Softvision.
that well-known identity.
Well-known Mr. Anonymous.
Yes.
The product ID I chose not to key in here, but I could have got that from the disk.
Yep. Physical
and there's
memory.
the amount of memory, 32 megabytes of physical memory on this machine.
So we're not talking about the virtual memory?
No, that's physical memory. It doesn't represent swap file memory, or page file as it's called in Windows NT.
Yep.
In this screen it just gives you the actual physical memory that's installed in the computer. So that's a very good way of testing to see if the user is, or if yourself in fact, if you're running Windows or if you're running Windows NT, because on any single machine you can actually dual boot into Windows and Windows NT.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah. You think I'd lie to you, Stephen?
I'm not sure, Stephen.
Okay, and we'll look at that later on.
Okay.
Okay, so the best thing now, I think, is if we can either log off or shut down.
Just to see how that works?
Yeah, should we log off
Yep.
first? Okay, let's log off. Actually, before I do that, if we look at the top of the screen here, you can see that we're currently using Sales Server. That's the name of my server.
Yes.
And I'm logged in as Stephen D. So that's always a
Okay.
good tip as well. In
So you
case,
can always
as
see.
an administrator, you might have two user accounts. That's a good way to check whether you're logged in as the administrator currently, which you may have different permissions than if you're logged in as a user.
Yep.
In which case you may have restricted your permissions.
we
So
just
this
say
will
okay?
end my Windows NT session.
Okay.
Let's just watch what happens now. Windows NT will go away and will close any applications, disconnect any connections to the server, come back with a default blank screen, and also the welcome message. This is what you usually see when you switch Windows NT on. Notice it says press Ctrl-Alt-Delete to log on.
Now, at this point, would it be safe just to switch the power off the PC?
You can switch the power off of the PC. There's also a shutdown option in that file menu, though, if you remember that.
Yep.
Because it might be that something is still running in the background.
Yep.
Because NT is what we call a multitasking operating system. We might have a server-based application such as SQL Server from Microsoft running in the background, or maybe there are still some connections open on the network or some other application running in background mode that you can't actually see on the interface.
Sure.
So it's really advisable to shut down first rather than to just switch the machine off at any stage.
There's a lot of talk about 32-bit processing now that Windows 95 has arrived. What about Windows NT? Is it running as a 32-bit system?
Windows NT is a full 32-bit operating system.
Which means what to the average user?
To the average end user, it means that it's faster than a 16-bit operating system, especially when running multiple applications, because it supports preemptive multitasking. You can run lots of applications at one time.
Right.
And I'm sure we'll come on to these things later on. We'll actually see some of these things. But also the 32-bitness allows me to use protect.
32-bitness?
32-bitness.
Is that an official description?
I've not heard anybody else use that.
No,
It's
okay.
certainly one that I use a lot.
Right.
It's 32-bitness.
Okay.
Allows me to run what we call protect mode drivers.
Good. Well, does that help me?
Are you pleased with that?
I'm very pleased about that.
It certainly does, because typically in MS-DOS and in Windows 3.1 and Windows for Workgroups, a lot of the drivers might be loaded from config.sys and autoexec.bat. They're what we call real mode drivers, because they physically sit in MS-DOS's real mode, or the first 640K of memory. Even if there's some of that application is loaded into high memory, there's still some pointer to that in real mode.
I'm sure that means something to the people watching, Steve. I'll nod and smile at you.
I hope you can stay with me here, Steve.
Yes, I'll keep up.
But basically, it just means that things are more robust, and also they're faster in Windows NT.
And that's obviously the bottom line for a lot of people.
That's the bottom line for a lot of people.
So here we are. We've got the Control-Alt-Delete to log on.
Yeah, this is what we call our secure keystroke. Log on. One thing about Windows NT, it's very, very secure. So that when you first switch on a Windows NT machine, it will give you this message. It will say press Control, Alt and Delete to log on. Now what usually happens when you press Control, Alt, Delete is it usually reboots the computer. With Windows NT, when you press Control, Alt, Delete, and I'm just going to press that now, it traps that keystroke, and the reason we put that in is because they were the only keystrokes that we could assure would not be used by any other application. It traps that keystroke. It asks me for my username, and also asks me where I'm logging in from. We'll come back to this later on, but I'm currently logging in from this machine, which is my sales server. And it asks me for my password. So notice, if I just press OK here, without giving it a password, it'll go away. It'll give me a logon message and tell me the system could not log you on. So it's telling me to retry, making sure I use the correct password. This is what makes it secure, because nobody can come along to your PC and just press escape or control and break and bypass any startup files. They have to log on.
And you've got help here too if you're totally confused.
We have got help. We've got lots of help in Windows NT. One thing to point out here is whenever you go to machine, you should always press Control Alt Delete, even if you see this current symbol here, this current logon screen. So imagine you just walked up to this screen. What would you do?
Well, you need to type a password.
Well, what I would suggest you do before you do that is you press Control Alt Delete.
Oh yes?
Yeah. So I'm just pressing that a second time. Notice nothing happened?
No, I did notice that.
That's because I'm currently in the Windows NT secure logon screen.
Right.
It could be, for instance, that somebody else has written an application that looks like this, that's not actually that. That's what we call a Trojan horse type application, which could try and trap your password and maybe pass that on to another application or another user. So it's always best to press Control Alt Delete whenever you're starting a Windows NT session. So at this point, I now know I'm in a secure logon screen. I can type in my username and password, press OK, and let's see what happens.
If it was a different user logging in, would they type a different username as well?
They would type in their own username and their own password.
Okay.
And here we can see back to that same screen. If we look on the lower right-hand side of the screen, there's Stephen's favourites.
Right.
It knew it was me. It gave me my favourite program group, and there I could run my application now from there.
Okay. Well, now that we're back in, has the file manager changed in any way?
The file manager has changed in Windows 3.51. If we double-click on File Manager and run that, it operates in much the same way as in Windows. So here you can see that I have a lot of directories that I can go and look in. I can double-click, and on the right-hand side of the screen it updates to show me some of the subdirectories within that directory. There's a couple of changes to the file manager. We'll look at, or we'll discuss some of the advanced security features later on, but notice there's a security menu.
All greyed out?
They're all greyed out. That means they're not enabled to me at the moment. And the reason they're not enabled is because I haven't actually implemented Windows NT file system, NTFS, so I can't use the security on this machine currently.
We're going to talk about that later.
We will come back and discuss that later on. One other thing I should point out is if you select the toolbar here in the File Manager, actually a lot of people using Windows 3.1 won't have even seen the toolbar in File Manager. We tend to take this for granted as we've had this since Windows 3.11. But we also had it in Windows NT in earlier versions, but now if we double click on this, because this is Windows NT 3.51, we get the option to customize the toolbar. So here you can see I already have some tools on my toolbar on the right hand side are currently installed. Things like connecting to network drives and so on, and viewing by file type or by file name. And so I could scroll through and remove items from there.
All your favourite functions are there?
All my favourite functions are there, but there's one here, you can see file search. Now if you've ever tried searching through your hard disk for a file, you'll know that in the file menu you've got the file search option. I'm just going to add that over here.
Just dragging it over.
You see where it says separator? I can drag, or I could have clicked on the add button. I'm going to drag that, and the little hand shows me I can drop that in here now. So after where it says disk connect from network, I could just let go here, and that would now put my file search tool on there.
Right.
And in fact, if I now choose a close, then that will close that. Notice also before I do that, you could move these tools up and down in in a position that they would appear on the menu.
And something else I've noticed is the question mark. We haven't seen that before in Windows.
Okay, the question mark will quickly take me into help, so it's another way of getting help. If I actually click on that, then you'll see I can now get this little question mark arrow. So if I click on something else in this dialog box now, such as the Add button, click on that, Windows NT will give me a little pop-up help that tells me it moves the buttons selected in the available buttons list to the toolbar buttons list.
So this is just a quick and dirty help, if you'll pardon the expression.
I wouldn't call it...
No, not to disparage it in any way.
If you're calling it a help,
sorry.
But
it's just a handy little, a nifty little help system.
A nifty little help system,
right.
I'll buy that. Yeah.
Okay.
So we can close that now, and because I've customised my toolbar, if we look on the toolbar, here we get the searches for files and directories. Notice also, if I move my mouse up to this toolbar, if I just hover with the mouse, so I'm going to hover with intent.
Yes.
And just leave it there for a moment. It tells me a little tooltip, part of IntelliSense that we have in the Office applications and Windows 95. We also have in Windows NT now. So that tells me that if I click on that, it would allow me to share a directory.
And that could be turned off if you didn't want to have it?
Yes, and if I click on this Find Search option, it now allows me to search for all my favourite documents. So if I wanted to, I could type in search for star.bat, and perhaps let's search backspace here to search in the root directory. I don't want to search all subdirectories because that would take a little bit longer. Just choose OK, and the search button comes back with the search results, autoexec.bat.
Right.
One thing about this, if we do that one more time, let's close the search results. So that's the little window that just came back with the results. Let's try something a little bit, take a little bit longer. I'm going to select my root drive first. Okay, C:\\. Notice also Windows NT tells me that's a FAT, a file allocation table system. And now if I choose my search, now I'm going to type star.star, so it's going to search for all files on my C drive, search for all subdirectories, and choose OK. Now that should take a little bit of time. Let's see what happens here, Stephen. It's searching the disk. Notice I can hide this window.
Oh, right.
So it's searching through some directories. It's found 842. Let's just hide that. And that's now operating down here in the background. And again, because Windows NT is multitasking, I can go ahead and I can do other things here, look in different directories. I could connect to a network drive. I could look at my CD-ROM.
While that search is being conducted.
While that search is being conducted. And notice now it's come back with the search results. So the little, what was down in the lower part of the screen, popped up here with the search results, a list of all of the files on my hard disk, including even the hidden and system files, because under my view preferences, I've asked it to show me those. So if we look under, oops, I can't do it in that window, but if I go back to this window, if I choose by file type, then that allows me to choose different options, show hidden system files, directories, programs, documents, and other files.
Okay, but again, there's a lot of commonality if people have used Windows 3.x.
There's a lot of commonality. There's some subtle differences as well that people should be aware of. And again, if people went to the help about File Manager, then that would come back and that would report that this is in fact Windows NT. So you can get into this screen for File Manager or from Program Manager, wherever you happen to be at the time.
Okay. Now, you don't have many network drives showing here. Is that just the way you've set this up?
It is the way I've set this up, but it's also because I'm not currently actually on a network, or rather connected to any network drives. What I could do is I could connect to a network drive from here.
Okay. By clicking on that button there.
That allows me to go and look on the network drive. And we'll actually come back to this later on. We'll see on the Microsoft Windows network I have here, I can go and look for other machines and connect to different machines and so on. But we'll get into networking much later on.
Good.
Okay.
I just noticed a key right over there to the right. Is that important?
The key is the same as the security menu. It allows me to view or set permissions on selected items. Because Windows NTFS supports security, you can set different permissions on a directory, on different files, for different users or groups of users.
Okay.
So for most people, if you haven't installed NTFS, you won't actually see that key.
In Windows 3.11, we had the command prompt. You could go out to DOS. Now, is that a concept we're losing in Windows NT?
It's certainly not.
We just noticed, in fact, you've got the icon right there.
We've got a little icon here for command prompt. If I double-click on that and run that, notice that takes me to what I would call a command prompt in a window, or an MS-DOS box, some people refer to that. We can actually do nice things here with this. We could actually press Alt and Tab key. And we can switch that into a full screen. If you zoom out here, you can see that that's full screen. And we can actually run some MS-DOS applications here. For instance, if I change directory, and I can dir to get a directory. But I can also do this, if I press Alt-Tab again, I can also do this back inside of Windows NT. So here we get a smaller window, if you like, that still allows me to do certain things. Now I can actually run some MS-DOS commands, such as let's type my netlog.txt file, and that will type the contents of that text file to the screen, and there it goes on the screen. Okay.
And you could copy data across from this window into Windows NT?
You could do using the clipboard. You could copy and select text and move it into Notepad or your word processor or something else.
Right.
But notice one other thing here. If I actually type in here the name of a Windows application, I'm going to use the keyword start, so I can choose start and then Notepad. That actually runs a copy of the Windows application Notepad from the command prompt. And also, if I now type in Notepad, just to show you some of the integration between Windows applications and the MS-DOS prompt, if I copy that to the clipboard, so that's an MS-DOS command, right?
Right.
dir/w.
Yep.
Go back over here, and now if I paste this in by choosing from the control menu, edit, paste, watch what happens when I choose paste. That actually runs that command prompt.
When you paste it, right.
Yeah. Similarly, if I go back up to the control menu and choose edit, mark, I can now mark. So supposing I wanted to take a snapshot of my directory, go back again, edit, copy, or I could have used the enter key as a shortcut.
Sure.
And now if I just click back on here on Notepad, I can now edit and paste that into Notepad. So I've got a copy of my directory structure within Notepad. So some integration between the MS-DOS prompt and also the Windows applications.
Okay, and to close the MS-DOS prompt down?
To close the MS-DOS prompt down, the best way is to go to the C prompt and type in the keyword exit and press return.
Okay.
Incidentally, one word of caution here. If I'd have typed Notepad, that would have still run Notepad, so I wouldn't have had to type in the start keyword like I did before. But what that would have done is it would have effectively closed this command prompt until I exited Notepad again, so I wouldn't have been able to go back in and type on the screen. Subtle difference there. So I'm going to exit that, press return, and that closes that. But notice it kept Notepad open for me.
Sure.
Okay, so let's just tidy up the screen a little bit and exit Notepad. I'm not going to save the changes.
Right. And is that a full set of DOS, a subset of DOS, or is it just some elements of DOS there?
Some elements of DOS. It's an MS-DOS emulation, if you like. It's the command prompt.
Is that how you ensure the compatibility with DOS applications?
It is, in that we allow people to use MS-DOS applications within Windows. We could also boot into MS-DOS and have a dual boot configuration on the machine. And we'll probably come on to these
things. I think we're coming up to compatibility shortly, so I won't preempt you now. I think we'll move on now and have a look at the next topic. I think it's worthwhile spending a few moments talking about the compatibility. There may be some nervous people out there thinking, will the applications we have today run under Windows NT?
Okay, that's a very good point, actually. One of the design features of Windows NT was to make sure that it was compatible, or as compatible as could be, with existing applications and with new generations of software. And there are several different topics that we could discuss here.
Sure.
One of which is compatibility with MS-DOS, and we've just seen how you can run some MS-DOS programs from the MS-DOS prompt.
Yes.
Most MS-DOS programs will work in Windows NT. There are some exceptions.
Like in all things.
Like always. And there's some very good reasons for that as well. Windows NT is a very secure operating system, and we touch on this again and again throughout the video. Because, of course, that was one of the other design objectives. And being secure and being compatible with a non-secure operating system, which MS-DOS is,